Hello YouTube. Hello Bratwurst. Welcome to the 8th of October 2019 edition of the 2 a.m. net, which doesn't start until 8 o'clock, and it is 7:42 right now, so it'll be another 17 or 18 minutes here till we get started. I apologize for the early start here. I tried to schedule this on YouTube, and apparently scheduling doesn't work like I thought it did. So here's the stream, not really ready to go yet, but we'll be here. So stay tuned. 2 a.m. net will begin in approximately 10 minutes. KC9UDX net control here. Good evening. This is KC9UDX. My name is Matt, and I welcome you to the 8th of October 2019 edition of the 2AM net. The purpose of this net is to promote the use of amplitude modulation and also to establish this part of this band as a place for AM activity in this area. Everyone is invited to listen. Licensed amateurs who can do so legally are encouraged to check in. Excuse my stuttering or stammering there. Bob Newhart would appreciate that. We listen in the AM mode and transmit in the AM mode where possible. If you cannot transmit in AM, we encourage you to listen in AM and transmit in FM. If you are transmitting in FM, please adjust your transmit frequency a couple kcs above or below from our receive frequency. This facilitates the use of slope detection, that is, demodulating your FM signal with our AM receivers. When checking in, please announce your call sign in standard phonetics. Again, this is KC9UDX. My name is Matt, and I will now begin accepting check-ins. Any stations wishing to check in, please come now.
Good evening, Matt. W9JCC.
Right off the bat, welcoming Frank, W9JCC, our most loyal check-in. Do we have anybody else for the 2AM net? Come now, please. I'll ask one more time here. Do we have anybody else that wants to check into the 2AM net? Come now, please. Well, Frank, either the band is quiet tonight or we're going to have a slow start and people are going to come trickling in a little while here. We will see. I wonder how you're doing this month. I 2 minutes ago discovered a dead mouse down here. It hasn't been here for very long, but it is definitely getting ripe. And unfortunately did not have enough time to get it out of here before the beginning of the net. So you can kind of imagine what it smells like in here right now. And I let some more smoke out of my Lowry organ a couple of nights ago. I woke up in the middle of the night and could not sleep. I turned on the organ and let quite a bit of smoke out of it. The odd thing is the audio still works. Usually when smoke comes out of that organ, it's the resistor voltage dividing network for the power amplifier, and usually that means audio is gone, but I hear a very loud 120 hertz hum, which tells me that a filter capacitor is completely dried out. So I've got at least two issues to resolve there. Don't know when I'll get around to that. Slowly but surely, as I keep saying for about a year now, making progress on my workbench so I can get other things done. But Frank, I will turn it over to you, W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, very good there, Matt. And good to hear you tonight as usual. And thanks for reminding me. I'll buy some new mouse traps. We don't get too many mice down here, but we've had some in the past, but I don't think I've had any here for the last couple of years. But the traps are getting rather old. I got a bunch of them I keep in the garage, and as soon as it gets down below freezing, I probably ought to get those set and taken care of. Yeah, fortunately I've got most of my equipment recapped here. I got some old stuff. I've got one or two caps that I have not replaced yet. The main capacitor in my SB401. It's a big can capacitor, sits in there sideways, and the main capacitor in the 75A4. All the other electrolytics in Ranger and those two rigs have been recapped. And I probably should do those two. They're getting a little bit old. Not looking forward to winter. our garden is pretty much cleared out. All we got left out there is a few pepper plants that are still slowly producing a little bit. And I guess when the first frosts come, we'll get rid of those and salvage what we can. And we've also got I think we've got a muskmelon or something like that growing out there that just came out of nowhere. And we're going to let that go as far as we can too. Everything else has been pulled out of there and thrown in the compost pile. So we got the grass cut on Monday, yesterday. Got the old John Deere out and took care of that. And I don't know how many more cuts we're going to have, but I think we're going to spoil it outside this winter with a cover, and I'm going to put a trickle charger on it. I don't know how that's going to work outdoors like that, but we don't have many other places to store it, so the garage is full. Back to you there, Matt. KC9UDX, net control, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. And I think you'll have no trouble with that. You may want to get a really nice tarp, not one of those, I'm not sure what kind of plastic those cheapy ones are made out of, the ones that shred by themselves in the wind and leave little streamers all over your yard. But a good canvas tarp, you probably know this already. What I do is I will prop up the tarp a couple of feet above whatever I'm trying to keep dry, and that'll mostly keep the snow and water away to the point where it's not going to just totally rot out. Do that and put a trickle charger on it. I think you'll have no issues. That's I've done that. The lawn tractor we actually use, though, is kept in a shed, at least most of the time. I think there's been years when we've had to store it outside. My wife did cut the grass today. She does that. I do not. She enjoys cutting it, and I guess it's been so long since I had to do it, I can't say that I don't. I have no idea anymore. So that's that. Yeah, they're saying it's supposed to snow this weekend. I can't imagine it will snow a whole lot. And of course they're predicting a lot of snow for the winter. I don't think it takes a genius to predict that, considering how much rain we've had all year. But you really never know. We could have weather about like this for a couple of more months. It wouldn't be unusual, I don't think. I have painters showing up tomorrow to paint the house, so I don't think it's supposed to rain. I hope that holds off. I guess it's supposed to rain Thursday. I don't know how long it's going to take for the paint that they're going to use to dry. I would assume it should be dry by then. And as far as old gear with capacitors, especially tube-driven stuff, I have had very good success usually just powering the stuff on once in a while, and I blame myself for the death of the capacitor in that Lowry. It's been a very long time since I actually turned the thing on. I think if I turned it on regularly, that capacitor would probably last a lot longer, but it's too late for that now. I did forget to mention we have Bratwurst on YouTube as usual. He's becoming quite regular here too. Says he likes cutting the grass, and he has a mid-80s Toro 5 horsepower mower. Excuse me. With that, we are at the bottom of a very short list here. Do we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. nut? Come now, please. Hearing none, it looks so far like we will not have a net like we had last month. Although I think most of the guys that showed up last month showed up pretty late, so Yeah, we'll see it in a little while, I suppose. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Frank, W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, very good there, Matt. KC9UDX, W9JCC. Well, as far as the cover goes for the lawn tractor, I've got pretty much a custom-made cover for it. It's made for that size tractor, and it looks to be pretty rugged. It doesn't seem to be the type that would do much in the sun except fade a little bit, which it's done a little bit this summer. But it's got elastic on both ends and around. You know, that it'll tuck around the wheels and so forth. The only concern I have there is that with the trickle charger on there, it might cause make a little bit of heat, and the mice might want to make nests in there. But we'll deal with that if that happens. And I do have a battery tender I bought specifically for that. And we tried a few different arrangements. I don't know if I told you. I think we tried 3 different arrangements in the garage as far as getting it stored in the garage, and the best we could come up with is that we could get the Winnie's old car in there with about 5 inches to spare, and I thought it was just a little bit too crowded. So I think we're going to leave it out there on the patio. Yeah, I heard the weather forecast that it might make it some flurries, I think Saturday, but no accumulation. So hopefully we don't get snow early here. I figure every day without snow is one less day that we got to deal with it. And trying on the house painters. Yeah, we've had our house painted, I think it's 3 times now. We moved here in 1978. The house was built in 76. And it's got aluminum siding. It's dark aluminum siding, very dark mahogany brown. And after about 10 or 15 years, it tends to fade. So we get it painted about every, I guess, 12 to 14 years or so. And this last time we got it painted, we actually had some cedar in the front, and that was starting to rot in some places, so we had that taken care of at the same time. And they did a fairly decent job of that. So we're probably good to go for another 10 or 12 years here. Yeah, I've got my Heathkit stuff up on the patio along with an old Hunter amplifier. And I used to carry that stuff downstairs in the wintertime. But for the last 6 or 7 years, I've just let it sit up. Okay, I don't know if I dropped out there or not. Matt, seems like maybe I left my finger off the button. And we'll say good evening to Bratwurst if he's listening there. I think you said he was. And I'll turn it back to net control. This is W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. And I'm guessing you have a timeout timer or something. I haven't timed you, but it seems like you drop out there at the same time every time that happens. I'm not exactly sure. There's several reasons I should have a stopwatch down here, and I neglected to do that again. That would be helpful for that as well. Well, it sounds like you have the right solution there for your lawn tractor. A custom-made cover like that is going to be better than most other solutions. I don't know what you think about this, but I would be tempted to get the tractor up off the ground a little bit. That might help keep the mice out and keep some air flowing underneath there. I'm not sure. My house is aluminum siding too, and as far as I know, the paint on the aluminum siding is original from 1979 or 1978. It certainly hasn't been painted as long as I've been here, almost 20 years now, and there's no evidence to me that it's ever been painted. And it's finally, just this past year, getting to the point where the paint is coming off and the aluminum is starting to corrode in the atmosphere. So that's why I'm getting it painted now. It'll be too late if I get it put off any longer here. What's kind of irritating is I kind of scheduled this to be done, I think, in April, but I'm not sure if it's entirely the fault of the weather or not, but I'm sure that played a part in it. And here we are in October, and it's hopefully finally getting done. Bratwurst says that he lives in a old farmhouse built in 1911, and it has some older aluminum siding. And he peeled back some of it and saw some white lead paint. Well, that's a good reason not to peel it back. Lead paint is not the worst thing in the world, but you sure don't want the wrong person to find out that you have it there either. Lead chromate is the formula that makes white paint. It's brilliant white, and brilliant white is a dead giveaway of lead paint, I guess. I was going to say something else here, and now I distracted myself reading the comments. I was going to say I hope the audio stream is working here, because I hadn't really tested that, but it must be, because Bratwurst wouldn't be commenting on things that are pertinent to what we're speaking about here. So the audio is working. Hopefully I'm not distorted. I didn't change anything from last month. Last month seems to have worked pretty well. It was the month prior to that apparently I had far too much gain. With that, we are at the bottom of the list. Let's see if we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net. Come now, please. Hearing none, and I'm going to take another standby here, only because I'm going to tune my receiver up a little better just to make sure. But if you're trying to check in, try again, please. Come now. And I hear no one, so I will turn it back to you, Frank, W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, Matt, very good. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a short one tonight. But as far as the timer goes on this, I'm using a TS2000. And now that you mention that, I think that when I first got this on the air, and it's probably a couple of years ago, that I may have set the timer, but I don't know what the timer is supposed to do, or if it's supposed to put out a beep or just drop out. But in any event, it may be on, it may be off, and the menu right now is too complex for me to go even and look to see what I've got in there. So anyway, it's not a big problem. Yeah, good idea about getting the tractor off the ground a little bit. I've got some 2x4s or maybe even some 4x. I don't know if I get it up on a 4x4. I'd have to drive it up on something, and we may just do that. In fact, I've got several brand new treated 2x4s in the basement here that I haven't used it yet on our picnic bench, which is on its last leg, and I could cut a couple of pieces there and at least get it up a couple inches off the ground. And fine on Bratwurst there being in a 1911 farmhouse. Well, that's it'll be a pretty old place, and I wonder if he's got it nice and cozy there. Depending on how they were built, I guess you could be as snug as a bug in a rug in one of those. Let's see. Oh, on YouTube. I didn't bring up YouTube because I didn't really need it, but on your next transmission there, Matt, maybe I'll Google your call and on YouTube and see if we can take a listen to what the signal sounds like. Black Connect Control, W9JCC.
All right, sounds good. And you'll have to let me know if we're sounding good. I suspect it's okay. Maybe a little quiet, but better too quiet than distorted. I have been in quite a few older houses over the years, and the one thing I can say about really old houses like that is a lot of them were designed with gravity heat, and I guess there's another. I'm trying to think of what the popular thing that people call those. They call them octopus furnaces. Basically, I think you know what it is. It's a furnace that convectively heats the house. There's no forced air fan. There's a lot of duct work and a single cold air return, usually by the front door or by a staircase. And a lot of times you'll find that people have retrofitted those for oil heat or natural gas, and it almost never fails when they do that. They underestimate the amount of fuel that you need to properly heat something like that. And if they haven't done that and they're still using coal or whatever the original fuel source was in a heater like that, they tend to do a really good job and keep the house very, very warm, to the point where you have to open the windows a lot in the winter to regulate the temperature. And actually, they're not that terribly inefficient as you'd think they are, especially if you run them on coal or sometimes oil if it's got an original oil burner. And Bratwurst says that they have a boiler. That's common too. Those systems can work well or not, depending on what's been done to them over the years. I almost bought a house. When I bought this one, I almost bought one that was well over 100 years old. And it was not a farmhouse, but it was a pretty large building with a lot of tiny rooms. And it was a cabin that had been added onto and added onto and added onto. And the basement had posts. I couldn't tell you how many posts holding up the first floor. Posts all over the place. And there was a very old-looking electrical panel in the basement. Literally a panel, a piece of wood on the fieldstone wall with fuse sockets nailed to it. And that was going to be removed. I guess it was a requirement for the sale, a requirement by the municipality. I'm not sure. I wouldn't have minded keeping that. But the second floor, there were a lot of these little 9x7 and 9x9 rooms, and in any given one of those rooms, you could open the door, and the door would be 4 inches of it would be cut off on the bottom, so that the door would clear the floor when you opened up the door. That's how unlevel the floors were. Between that, the close proximity of other houses, and just the price. This was back when the housing market was at its absolute peak, back when they called it the housing bubble, I guess. And everything was overpriced back then, and I could not justify buying a house in the condition that one was in for the price. And Bratwurst says they used to have a coal boiler, but they have an oil boiler from around 1965. And I was going to comment on something else here again, and I distracted myself. My workbench is slowly proceeding, and it is of course tying up my shop. I'm building the base right now. As soon as I can get the base put together, which shouldn't take much longer, then I can do whatever I have to do to finish everything. I'm going to finish the base and the top, the bench top surface. I don't have the rest of anything built. This bench is going to be sort of cantilevered. The bench top will stick way out in front of the base, with the anticipation that there's going to be some 19-inch racks on the back. It's all going to be very heavy steel, and that's what's going to keep the top down. But in the meantime, until I get the top portion built, I will probably do whatever staining and varnishing I'm going to do. And then I will set the workbench up as it is in the basement here. If I can get some help, I'm going to have to see if I can find somebody that can help me lift that top down here. I'm not sure how we're going to do that yet. But I'll set it up without the shelving or racks on top of it. And I've got plenty of things that I can use to weight it down otherwise, but I'll probably build the racking whenever I can. But something else I have to do in my shop before winter, I've got to do something else with the stovepipe that's in there. There's a 6-inch diameter single wall stovepipe going out the roof. And the problem I have is every winter the heating and the expansion and contraction of that pipe going through the roof always causes a serious leak, which I patch up at least twice a year every year, and there's so much patching material up there now it's ridiculous. But my thought is that the furnace I've got has a 4-inch flue on it. I guess if that's a flue, I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology there, but the pipe coming out of the furnace is 4 inches. And what I'm thinking about doing is putting a 4-inch tube inside of the 6-inch tube, and maybe put some fiberglass around it to keep them separate. And so that would be more like a double wall stovepipe, and hopefully keep that keep the seal between the roofing sealer and that pipe from cracking and leaking. So I'll probably do that this weekend if I get an opportunity. I'll probably get stuck working this weekend. It is my weekend to work. And I thought we were out of the woods here, because this would be, if you look at the calendar, the last, every other week is my overtime weeks, and this would be the last week for me for mandatory overtime that would coincide with the 2 a.m. net. But one of my co-workers is switching to a different shift, and that throws our work groups off balance. And with him leaving, I am the low man in seniority again, so I will be forced to move to the other work group, which makes my overtime week happen on the opposite week. That means the next 2 months, which is all we have left in the year, the 2 a.m. net will fall on mandatory overtime weeks for me again. So I really can't guarantee that I'll be here until the last minute. With that, before I keep rambling here, we're at the bottom of the list again. Let's see if we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net. Come now, please. Hearing no one. Reading a comment here that Bratwurst left. He says that the original family removed the coal burner and installed the oil one. Well, with that, I'll send it to you, Frank. W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, KC9UDX, W9JCC. Yeah, I'm familiar with those old coal furnaces there, Matt. When I grew up, we had big old coal burning furnace in the basement with the big tubes, and the heater coil for the hot water was a pipe that coiled through the burning chamber there to make hot water. So you had to keep that thing going. You wanted hot water and heat. And yeah, we used to have the fellow come with the dump truck and dump the coal down into a coal bin and so forth. But I think we moved out of that house around 1951, and then we had the new house had a Lennox gas furnace, and later on my dad bought a air conditioner to go with it. So we're in pretty good shape after that. I did go up on YouTube, and your audio's coming through just great, and videos right there showing the transceiver. And I would say that delay, I try to get a handle on the delay. I think it's probably something like 10 or 15 seconds, but could be wrong on that, because it's kind of hard to judge when you're listening to the same thing delayed there. But it's not bad. It's certainly not within a few seconds, but it's reasonably okay, I would say, as far as the delay goes. And you said that you got to bring your top of your bench downstairs. You may have mentioned it before, but I didn't realize you were building it two different places there. You might explain that again. Sounds like you might be building it, part of it in the garage, and then having to move it in the basement. But sounds like an interesting project, and the workbench sounds like it's going to be too nice to use once you get done with it there, Matt. It's going to be more like a real nice table, I think. Hypernet Control, WNNJCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. And I guess that's not quite the way I think of it. I don't think it's going to turn out to be like something nice. It's just going to be big and heavy, substantial. I guess I was trying to document the build of this thing, but I have neglected lately to take pictures. I've got a frame that's going underneath the bench top, and I've had to build this in the order that I did because I don't know what thicknesses the material that I have is going to end up until I build this stuff. So I had to build the bench top and then the frame that goes underneath it, and now I've got to build the support structure that goes underneath that. The frame that holds up the top, I think I sent you pictures of the top, which is made out of all those skid boards. Now those boards all they started out 10 feet or 12 feet, I think 10 feet long if I remember right. I'm not sure anymore. But you know, I cut most of those down to make it easier to square them up. Some of them I did not cut shorter, and I ended up making the frame that goes underneath the top out of that. But I used the material that I was going to build the stand from to build raised garden boxes for my wife. So I had to buy some, I think, fir 4x4s to build that. I did that last weekend or the weekend before. I've got those pieces all cut, or at least they're squared up. They're not cut to length. Some of them are, but most of them are not. As soon as I cut them to length, I can dowel them and glue them, and then it's just a matter of staining and finishing and bringing everything down here. My workshop is in a separate building from my house. It's probably 8 to 10 feet away from my house, and the building is I think about 15 by 20. I could be wrong about that. It's been a very long time since I thought about the dimensions of it, so I could be very wrong there. It's a very small space considering what I have in it. You know, I guess I don't want to talk too much about that on the air here, but I've got quite a bit of equipment in there, and I'll put it this way, I laid it out so that with everything I have in there, if I pack it all up against the walls, which that's the way it's intended to be when I'm not using it, I can fit a mid-sized car in there and be able to work on it if I have to in a pinch. And I've only had to do that once. I've done it other times because it was convenient, but there's only been one time when I actually had to do that. My wife had a F-15 Blazer that in the middle of the winter, she was pregnant and needed to get back and forth to work, and we had a pretty heavy snowfall, and it was late in the year and they were not clearing the roads, and we needed that thing to have four-wheel drive. It was just an absolutely terrible vehicle to drive without four-wheel drive, and the front axle disconnect on there is actuated by a vacuum shifter over a cable, which is a really convoluted setup, I always thought, but that vacuum diaphragm burst, so I had to pull that thing into there to replace it. That's the only one time I needed to do that, but I try to keep it so that I can always do that if I have to. And that's once, you know, I'm in there working and I pull everything away from the walls so I can use it, that just barely gives me enough room to build things. I've built some rather large shelving units over the years here, and those things and this bench are really stretching the limits of what I can do in that small building. And you may hear in the background here, I hope the FCC doesn't consider that music. That is the sound of my son playing my electric guitar. That is a ringtone that he made for my wife, and I'm using it on my phone right now, which is here so that I can monitor the YouTube video. I think somebody is sending me an email. I'll have to put that thing on Do Not Disturb. Thanks for the audio report. I'm not sure if I said that already, but that really does help. It's actually a very difficult thing for me to get that right. I have a studio mic on a stand in here on about a 40-foot cord going back to my studio, and the microphone is plugged into a mixing console. The mixing console goes to the PC that is capturing the video from the video toaster, and of course from there it goes to YouTube. And I could monitor that from here, but the only reasonable way I can do that would cause enough feedback to where you can't really monitor it reliably anyway, and of course nobody wants to hear that kind of feedback. Well, with that, we are at the bottom of the list, of course. Let's see if we have any more check-ins for the 2 a.m. net. Come now, please. Hearing none, I will send it back to you, Frank, W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, KC9UDX, W9JCC. And I didn't give you a signal report tonight, Matt, but your usual 40/9 in here. I got the antenna down a little bit. I never got it fully up again after the last wind threat we had. So, but we're still up pretty good height, up probably around, well, the antenna itself is probably at about 64, 65 feet. So that should help a little bit. And I'm looking at your clock on the YouTube, and I don't, since that's an analog clock, and I don't know how accurate it is, kind of hard to tell. My clock here that's synced to WWV says 8:40 in about 15 seconds, and yours looks like it says about 8:40 right now. But so I think that's pretty close. I wish I had a workshop like you have, and I wouldn't have to worry about storing anything, and that would be a neat thing to have. I don't have a lot of tools here. I just have a few hand tools. I build everything with saws and files and so forth, and wrenches, and so we're pretty limited as far as power tools. I have a circular saw, and I've got a router which I've never used, and some router bits, and I do have some battery powered electric drills. Now I have one now, and I got a couple of AC powered electric drills, but we managed to get along without too much over here. Trying to think of what else is to talk about here, and I'm losing it for lack of any subject there, Matt. Back to you, KC9UDX, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank. Well, it's no problem. It's we are 40 minutes into the net here, and that can be a long time for two people to find things to talk about. I used to get by with very minimal woodworking stuff, and I probably still could. Sometimes I wonder about that. It seems like I built a lot of things back when I had a much harder time doing it than I do now. But of course, most of that is just due to my work schedule. A router is something I have never had, at least not a handheld router. I've got an overarm router, and it's kind of wobbly, so it doesn't always do the best job. And actually, I can make that a pin router too if I'm ambitious. I have never used it as a pin router. No real need to at this point. But the only sort of routing I ever do with the overarm router is rounding corners. I've got cutting knives for quarter rounds and OGs, and I'm not even sure what else. I forget what all the different cabinet corners are called. But someday I should get a handheld router, at least a trim router or something. Well, technically I've got a small trim router. I've got a what is that brand from Racine? I can't think of the name of the little die grinders. Dremel. I've got a Dremel brand. Well, a typical one of their die grinders, but it comes with a router base, which I've never actually used. And I guess as a trim router that probably works pretty good, but for the kind of stuff I would use it for, I guess I haven't bothered for very good reason. And these days, something like a handheld router is not an expensive thing, so I guess I'm not sure why I've never gotten around to buying one yet. I guess someday I'll have to do that. The biggest thing that takes up space in my shop is well, the second biggest thing. I've got a CNC Bridgeport, which that takes up the most space, but the second biggest thing is a radial arm saw. It's a Toolcraft one, not a nice old DeWalt. It's a not as a sturdy one, but it does the job, and it's actually very handy the way it's made. It's a little bit different than a traditional radial arm saw. It's a it's got a turret on top so that the radial arm part doesn't actually turn. That there's a turret in the center that does, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. But my grandfather, I think, originally bought that. I'm not sure if he bought it new or not, but I have that now. And incidentally, that's what makes an overarm router too. I can use that as an overarm router. They actually convert that into a lot of different things, but the radial arm saw and the overarm router are the only things I use that for. And I think I'm starting to run out of things to talk about too, although we're at the time here where we usually start winding down. But let's see if we have any last minute check-ins for the 2 a.m. net. If you ever thought you'd want to check in, here is your opportunity. Don't be shy. Come now, please. Hearing none, I think the other thing I wanted to comment on here is the clock that I have. It's pretty accurate. I did set it to WWV just prior to the net, and it keeps time pretty well. And it hasn't been that long, obviously, but it should be just about right on. The only problem is there's a lot of parallax error the way with the camera angle, and I would try to do something about that, but this camera is the clarity is not there to make it worthwhile. This camera is a security camera, and it was quite a leading, cutting edge technology thing when it was new. It does 640 by 480 digital video over Ethernet, which these days is not something big deal, but when I bought it, it sure was, and the price the price was according. But that obviously you get some pixelization from that, and that is received by a Raspberry Pi, which is hooked up to my video toaster by NTSC. So you lose a lot of clarity doing that double conversion there. So that explains that. Someday I'll get a proper NTSC camera and I will lose those extra conversion steps, and that will help a lot. But until then, this is what we've got. Something else I'd like to do, my video toaster and all of my audio equipment is on the opposite end of the building here, and Ethernet with the camera helps because there's not really any cables running back and forth for that, but the microphone cable, as I explained earlier, sure is. And of course I have no control over the computers on the other end of the building when I'm sitting in here, so something that I keep saying I'm going to do, and I don't know when I'll ever get around to doing it. I've got a computer I like to set up in here to do the job that the one in that room is doing, and dedicated just for doing this net. That would eliminate a lot of the complexity for what I've got going here. But with that, I'll turn it back to you, Frank, W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, very good there, Matt. And I was just going to mention about the router I have. Quite a few years ago, probably 20 years ago or so, I needed to make a little nightstand by hand because I couldn't find one the right height. We have a dresser with some swinging doors right next to the bed, and if I tried to swing the doors open, I would interfere with any nightstand that I could buy out there in the market. So I ended up building my own. I only had to drop it about an inch, but that's all it took. And so I built that, and then I borrowed my next door neighbor's router to do the to round the edges, put a nice edge on the top, and that worked out pretty good. although strictly by hand. I didn't have any mechanical guide on there or anything like that, but it worked out pretty good. And so I had visions of maybe making some other things, and my daughter got me a router for Christmas, and then I bought a set of tool heads for it, and they've been sitting in the bag ever since, so it's in really good shape. I do have a Dremel too. I bought a Dremel here about 5 years ago, and it does come in handy once in a while. Last time I used it, I used to make a center connector for my 40 and 80 meter inverted Z, and used PVC pipe and caps and so forth, and used it to cut some pieces out of that to make the T. Yeah, I was looking at your clock when it looked like it was exactly quarter to the hour, and I was probably 1 minute ahead there on my clock. So you're a minute or less on the delay, probably less than a minute. Anyway, I don't have too much more. I'll turn it back to you, see if you have anything else there, Matt. KC9UDX, net control, W9JCC.
All right, thank you, Frank, and fine business on the nightstand. And I certainly appreciate what you mean with the router and the cutting bits still in the bag. And the Dremel that I bought this one, I think this year or last year. I broke down. I 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I bought one. It didn't last a week, and that made me say I'd never buy one ever again. And I broke down and bought one. I forget what it was I was doing, but it really didn't make sense to do the job without it, whatever it was. Oh, I remember what it was. It was in my first floor bathroom. I've got a well, in the shower there's a faucet, I guess you'd call it, the you know, the knob that you turn it on and off and adjust the temperature with. I think there's two screws that hold the trim plate that goes on, that attach that to that faucet unit, and the screws were seized and broke off when I tried to take them out, or at least one of them did, and I needed some way to cut out as much as I could and drill and tap new holes, and the pencil grinder that I have, or the air tools that I have, really wouldn't have done the job very well, so I bought that Dremel, and of course it did do that, and I've used it since for removing some very stubborn caulk, and beyond that hasn't seen much use. But of course that's something that now that I have it, I probably use it a lot more if I ever get around to doing things. But I am running out of things to say too. We are actually getting to the end of the time that I allot for the net here anyway. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I tried scheduling on YouTube. I tried scheduling the live stream here, and I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, because I thought it would start when I scheduled it, and it didn't. It started 20 minutes early. So I'm not sure if it's just going to cut out at 9 o'clock or not, because that's when I set the end time for it. But I'm kind of losing my voice here anyway. It's getting hard to talk, and I'm not exactly sure why. It's probably just sinus problems this time of the year. I've had a pretty splitting sinus headache for almost a week now, on and off. I don't have it now. At the start of the net, it was pretty bad, but it seems to have subsided. So I don't know if I've got allergies or sinus something going on here. So unless you've got anything else, we can finish up here. I'll send it back to you, Frank. W9JCC from KC9UDX.
Okay, very good there, Matt. Yeah, not too much more. I hope the sinus problem doesn't give you too much grief there. I was just listening to the news tonight, and they were talking about flu shots, maybe being a bad flu season this year, and telling people to get out there and get them right away. Usually get ours when we go for a yearly checkup, and that's not coming for another month or two, so I was talking to Winnie a little bit earlier, and we thought, well, maybe we'll just go in and get them early and be covered. And hopefully we don't get, hopefully they work on us anyway. Anyway, thanks for running the net tonight, Matt. And we'll say 73s. And hopefully we'll hear you on next week as usual, or next month rather. Back to you for any final comments. KC9UDX, W9JCC.
All right. All right, thank you, Frank. And I wish you two well on those flu shots. I don't put a whole lot of stock into the efficacy of those things, if I'm saying that right. It seems to me like the flu virus that goes around, they couldn't possibly have the right strain of that in order to give you a shot. But they really seem to push that stuff, so maybe they're doing something I don't understand. So like I say, I wish you well on that. I have not gotten one in maybe 15 years now. The only time I ever did get one, I caught the flu pretty bad right after I got the shot, so I said enough of that. If I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, and I'm not going to worry about the shot. But with that, I will say 7-3. Thank you for being here, Frank. It sure makes it better than me calling out and getting no responses. It's been a long time since I've had to do that, but I haven't forgotten. I think last year there was a couple of months, more than a couple, where that's what the 2 a.m. net consisted of. And I think Bratwurst is still watching. I'll say 7-3 to him, even though he's not licensed yet. I'm sure he'll get there sooner or later. But with that, I will say this concludes the 2 a.m. net. And we will meet again on the 12th of November. Until then, this is KC9UDX 7-3, and good night.
Okay, 73, Matt. W9JCC will be quick.